Welcome to the Eat This Book podcast. I'm Michael Whitworth. Each day we take a small piece of scripture and we sit with it. Not a quick snack that disappears before lunch, not a chore you check off of a list, but rather a meal meant to be savored. So pull up a chair. Let's eat. Imagine someone is handed the cure to a fatal disease. Not offered it, not told about it, but given it, placed in their hand, fully understood. And then imagine they look at the cure, understand exactly what it is and what it cost to develop, and deliberately pour it out on the ground. Not because they didn't know, but because they did know and chose to reject it anyway. There is no second cure. This was the one, and they threw it away with full knowledge of what they were doing. The writer of Hebrews has just given his audience the most beautiful invitation in the letter. Draw near, hold fast. The curtain is torn, the way is open. Come in with full assurance. And now, immediately after that warmth, he turns and issues one of the most sobering warnings in all of Scripture. Because an open door can be walked through, or it can be deliberately, knowingly slammed shut. And the writer loves his audience too much not to tell them the truth about what that would mean. For if we go on sinning deliberately after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. Every word here matters, so let's slow down. If we go on sinning deliberately, the writer is not describing the ordinary stumbles and failures of the Christian life. He is not talking about the sins you grieve over, confess, and turn from. The picture is of ongoing, willful, deliberate sin, a settled direction of the life, chosen with full awareness. And it happens after receiving the knowledge of the truth. This is someone who knew, who understood the gospel, grasped what Christ had done, and then chose to walk away from it deliberately. And the consequence is stark. There no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. Not because Christ's sacrifice is insufficient, but because it is the only one. If you reject the single sacrifice that takes away sin, there is nothing else. You can't go back to the animals, which never worked anyway, and you've turned from the one offering that does. To deliberately reject Christ's sacrifice is to reject the only thing that could ever save you. There is no plan B, because Christ was never plan A. He was the only plan. The Hebrew writer continues, but a fearful expectation of judgment and a fury of fire that will consume the adversaries. What remains for the one who deliberately rejects the only sacrifice is not another chance, but judgment. The writer doesn't soften it. This is fearful language, and it's meant to be. He wants his audience to feel the seriousness of what's at stake, because the danger is real, and a warning that doesn't sound like a warning is no help to anyone. Then he makes an argument from lesser to greater, the same kind of reasoning we've seen before in this letter to the Hebrews. Anyone who has set aside the law of Moses dies without mercy on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much worse punishment, do you think, will be deserved by the one who has trampled underfoot the Son of God and has profaned the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified and has outraged the Spirit of grace? Under the Old Covenant, rejecting the law of Moses brought severe consequences. If that was serious, the writer asks, how much more serious is it to reject not the law, but the Son himself? And look at 3 devastating verbs he uses. To trample the Son of God underfoot, treating the King of Glory like dirt on the road. To profane the blood of the covenant, treating the precious blood of Christ as something common, worthless, or unclean. And to outrage the Spirit of grace, insulting the very Spirit who offers grace. These are not actions of someone who stumbled. They are actions of someone who looked at the greatest gift in the universe and treated it with contempt. Notice a haunting phrase in the middle of that sentence, the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified. The person in view had been set apart by that blood. They had been part of the covenant community, had claimed the blood of Christ, had appeared to belong. This isn't an outsider who never knew. This is someone who was inside, who had every appearance of belonging, and who then trampled what they had claimed. That's what makes the warning so sobering. It's not aimed at those who never heard. It's aimed at those who heard, who seemed to belong, and who are now in danger of deliberately walking away. For we know him who said, vengeance is mine, I will repay, and again, the Lord will judge his people. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. The writer grounds his warning in God's own character, quoting Deuteronomy. God is a God of justice. He will not be mocked. And then comes the line that lands like a stone dropped into still water. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. The living God, not a distant idea, not a comfortable abstraction, not a domesticated deity who exists to affirm us. The living God, real, active, holy, and just. And here's what makes the phrase so weighty. The hands of God are, for those who trust Him, the safest place in the universe. To be held in His hands is the Christian's greatest comfort. But to fall into those hands as an adversary, as one who has trampled His Son and profaned His blood, that is a fearful thing. The same hands that hold His children are the hands that no rebel can escape. God is not less real, less powerful, or less holy because we would prefer Him tame. He is living, and that reality cuts both ways. Here's what I think we should savor from this passage. First, the warning is aimed at insiders. This passage isn't describing people who never heard the gospel. It's describing people who received the knowledge of the truth, who were sanctified by the blood of the covenant, who appeared to belong. The most sobering warnings in Hebrews are always for those inside the community, because the greatest danger is not never hearing, but hearing, receiving, and then deliberately turning away. Second, there is no other sacrifice. If you reject the one offering that takes away sin, there is nothing else. This is not because God is stingy, but because Christ is enough, and Christ is the only. To turn deliberately from Him is to turn from the only door there is. The seriousness of the warning is a measure of the singularity of the gift. And third, God is living. He is not a comfortable abstraction we can shape to our liking. He is real, holy, and just. For those who trust Him, His hands are the safest place there is. But He will not be trampled without response. The reality of the living God is the ground of both our greatest comfort and this most solemn warning. If this passage frightens you, if you read it and worry you've committed the sin it describes, that very fear is strong evidence you have not. The person the writer describes is not anxious about their standing. They have trampled the Son underfoot with contempt and walked away deliberately without grief. If you are grieved by your sin, if you long to draw near, if the thought of walking away from Christ pains you, that is the heart of someone still tender, not someone who has hardened into deliberate rejection. The warning is doing its work in you exactly as intended, keeping you close, not driving you away. If you've been treating sin casually, telling yourself grace will cover whatever you choose to keep doing, this passage confronts that presumption directly. Deliberate, ongoing, willful sin after knowing the truth is not something to be casual about. Grace is not a license. The blood of Christ is not common. If you've been playing with sin because you assume forgiveness is automatic, no matter your posture toward it, this warning is the loving hand on your shoulder, turning you back before the drifting becomes something worse. If you've grown numb to the greatness of what Christ did, if the blood of the covenant has started to feel ordinary to you, this passage jolts the numbness. That blood is precious. It sets you apart. Treating it as common is the beginning of the very contempt the writer warns against. Let this be the moment you recover the wonder. The blood that saved you is not cheap, and neither are you. If you find the idea of God's judgment uncomfortable, if you'd prefer a God who only comforts and never confronts, sit with the phrase, the living God. The comfort of being held in His hands and the terror of falling into them as an adversary come from the same reality. He's alive and He is real. A God who could not judge could not save either. The holiness that makes His warning fearful is the same holiness that makes His salvation glorious. And if you've been on the edge of walking away, tempted to let go, to slam the door that Christ tore open, hear the warning for what it is, an act of love. The writer is not trying to terrify you into despair. He is trying to keep you from throwing away the only thing that can save you. The door is still open. The invitation from the last passage still stands. Draw near. Don't trample the very gift that was meant to hold you. Next time on Eat This Book, what do you do when you're tempted to give up? Hebrews doesn't first point struggling Christians to the future, it points them to the past. Join me again in Hebrews chapter 10 as we discover how remembering God's faithfulness in the former days gives us the strength to endure today. Thanks for eating with me. Until next time, may the Word dwell in you richly.